Right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected chief guest, respected guest speakers, respected chair of this session, respected Director General of BIISS, Excellencies, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for being part of the event. On behalf of Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, BIISS, I welcome you all to the seminar on Rohingya crisis and the emerging security challenges, response strategy of Bangladesh. Today, we are very much honored to have among us Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Honorable Minister for Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh as the chief guest. Learned audience, today's seminar will be chaired by Ambassador Munshi Faiz Ahmed, former chairman of BIISS. Today, we have got 4 learned speakers who are going to deliver their valuable speeches on the respective subject. Followed by that, the floor will be open for open discussion. Distinguished participants, today's program will be started with the welcome address by Major General Sheikh Pasha Habibuddin, OSP, SGP, BAMS, AFWC, PSC, Director General, BIISS. After the open discussion session, guest speaker Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Honorable Minister for Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs will deliver his valuable speech. Finally, The chair of this session will end the program by giving his concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I now request today's chair, Ambassador Munshi Faiz Ahmed, to kindly commence the program. Sir, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Honorable Minister for Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, all the designated speakers, the Director General of BIISS, and the distinguished audience. I see a lot of very distinguished faces here, and all of you, welcome to all of you. And let us start the program today. We all know that the topic today is Rohingya crisis and the emerging security challenges, response strategy of Bangladesh, a very important and timely topic for discussion. We have discussed this Rohingya issue many times, but very important for us is to keep the issue alive in view of all kinds of issues that are competing for the limelight and for the attention of the international community. This is a major burden on Bangladesh and all of us. It's a great challenge. And if we let it die down or go beyond our eyes, then it will become even more intractable. We know we already know that it's very difficult to resolve. It will take a lot of time, but we must keep it alive at all times. And that is definitely, that is one of the main purposes that this seminar will serve today. And the chief guest today is a very learned minister of the government, and he is very well versed in all these topics and has a very special focus on legal issues as the Minister for Law. So we are really looking forward to hearing from him new areas of focus in this discussion. But before that, we will of course hear the other speakers, and we'll have an open discussion. But to start the ball rolling, may I now invite Major General Sheikh Pasha Habibuddin, OSP, SGP, BAMS, AFWC, PSC, Director General of BIS, to kindly deliver his welcome address. Major General Pasha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Honored Chief Guest, Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Honorable Minister for Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, respected Chair, Ambassador Munshi Faiz Ahmed, learned panelists, Excellencies, distinguished guests, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to you all. On behalf of Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, let me welcome you all to today's seminar on Rohingya crisis and the emerging security challenges, response strategy of Bangladesh. Our heartfelt gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Anisul Haq MP, for gracing the occasion. At the beginning, I would like to pay my solemn reverence to the memory of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. With utmost gratitude, I recall 3 million of our countrymen who sacrificed their lives and 2 lakh women who were tortured and violated during our War of Liberation in 1971. In this auspicious month of February, I pay my tribute to Salam, Barkat, Rafiq, Jabbar, and all other language martyrs who sacrificed their lives for establishing Bangla language as our mother tongue. Distinguished audience, almost 6 years ago, when thousands of persecuted Rohingyas started to flee violence, atrocities and crimes against humanity, our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina took a human stance to open our borders. This compassionate gesture came from a country which does not have a large landmass, is overpopulated, and yet to fulfill its dream to be a prosperous and developed nation. Yet, when our Honorable Prime Minister said that, I quote, "We shall share our food with them," I unquote. This act of benevolence stems from Bangladesh's collective memory of sufferings as a nation in 1971 and a normative vision for a peaceful world that is bound by brotherhood and based on international norms and empathy. Learned participants, despite the goodwill, the pressure of more than 1 million Rohingyas has put severe strain on our society, security, economy, natural resources, environment, and ecology. Also, some of these socio-ecological effects are quite irreversible. While many of Myanmar's South and Southeast Asian neighbors have made it clear that Rohingyas are not welcome on their shoreline, Cox's Bazar became the largest settlement camps for displaced people in the world. Therefore, it is imperative for the international community to realize Rohingyas' stay in Bangladesh is temporary and a permanent and sustainable solution to the crisis has to be reached through the immediate repatriation of the Rohingyas. The international community in general has so far remained engrossed in the humanitarian aspect of the issue rather than the resolution of the prolonged crisis through sustainable repatriation. Distinguished guests, further delay in repatriation may utterly frustrate the displaced Rohingya and entice them to fall prey to human and drug trafficking, criminal activities, radicalization, and other dangerous underground ventures. From news report, we are already aware that some Rohingyas have been involved and also the victims of various criminal activities, ranging from robbery and abductions to smuggling of arms and drugs in the region. In recent years, Rohingya have also become the targets of human trafficking networks, focusing on refugee camps. Nonetheless, the deteriorating security situation in Myanmar border and Rakhine state signals grave security implications for the South Asian region and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, appeasement should be replaced by leveraging of political and economic ties with Myanmar to help the distressed Rohingya realize their cherished ambition of returning to their homes free from fear. It would have been more encouraging to get the world community assertively vocal on severe restrictions of movement, healthcare, education, access to mobile and internet, and livelihood opportunities in Rakhine, thereby fostering an environment conducive to voluntary repatriation. For the greater interest of these persecuted people and the stability of the region, the Rohingya crisis need to be resolved in a durable manner with utmost priority. At the end, may I formally welcome you all to the beach and at the same time, thank you once again for taking your time off and making this August gathering a success. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz, Joy Bangla.
Thank you, General Pasha. Now let's get on with the with listening to the designated speakers. Our first speaker is Lieutenant General Muhammad Mahfuzur Rahman, OSP, ICDS, NDC, AFWC, PSC, PhD, former Principal Staff Officer, Armed Forces Division, Prime Minister's Office, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. I must add here something that is not written in the card, that he belongs to the same alma mater that I studied in, that is Geneva Cadet College. And I'm very proud to see him speaking here today as an old cadet from Geneva Cadet College. So, General, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Chair, DG, learned panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning. Today, I would like to focus on the eastern part of Bangladesh, bordering India and Myanmar, where the Rohingyas are located now. There is a perfect geophysical condition for insurgency. The insurgents or separatists can melt away quickly, and it's a nightmare for the regular forces. In this part of the world, the big power relationship and regional power rivalry dominate the geopolitics and has ramifications on various events. Indian Ocean relationship between US and China in the Pacific interlocks with the regional rivalry between India and China. Both India and China are energy-hungry powers where energy security plays a key role. In particular, China's energy security is their center of gravity. China needs Myanmar as a vessel state for her energy security, namely gas and oil pipelines. Indian Kaladan multimodal project is strategic for her connectivity to her eastern states through Bay of Bengal and Rakhine states of Myanmar. India, and including her allies, do not want Myanmar totally falling into the folds of China for geostrategic reasons. In the Indian Ocean region, China vertically expanding and India horizontally expanding, laterally expanding. China vertically expanding through BRI projects, through the pivot state into the Indian Ocean, through Myanmar and Pakistan. On the contrary, India is expanding from peninsular India on either side to the west, GCC and Middle East, then in the east through its policy like Look East and Act East policy. So there is a condition of geopolitical and geostrategic tectonic plate movement of this regional power in two different directions, causing geopolitical and geostrategic tremor, where Bangladesh is trying to maintain balance in this relationship. This has caused her to be a kind of buffer state, and buffer state had its inbuilt side effects. Besides, it is easier to tame smaller countries with security anxiety, instability, and democratic deficit. I feel 1.2 million Rohingya refugees would give enough security anxiety to Bangladesh and instability in the region over time. This is a ticking time bomb. Though India claims to have peace deal with separatist group bordering Bangladesh, that is Mizoram and Tripura, but it is not all that peaceful. Same holds good for Bangladesh. She signed peace deal with PCJSS in December 1997. Now there are 4 groups with their armed doings. In case of Myanmar, the states, I'm talking about Chin state and the Rakhine state bordering Bangladesh, they also signed peace deal with the Myanmar government, but situation is almost the same. In case of Myanmar, the situation is little different now. Arakan army runs a parallel administration in most parts of Rakhine, where Junta mostly controls the cities. Having relation with one will antagonize the other. In this conundrum, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army and freshly resurfaced Rohingya Solidarity Organization shall further complicate the situation. About Rohingya repatriation, Myanmar Chief of Army or the Chief of Defense, General Min Aung La, and Arakan Army Chief, Major General Tan Naing, they have opposing viewpoints. Above all, there are geopolitical of regional and global powers play going on. So how Bangladesh should navigate in this murky water is a complex question. What we are seeing now in our Southeast is a complicated combination of risks, both traditional and non-traditional. This part of the region has the potential to be sucked into the vortex of Golden Triangle and narco-terrorism associated with arms smuggling and human trafficking, and Rohingya refugees would be readily available target group into this, further adding complexity to the already dwindling security situation. However, this kind of non-traditional security issues do not take place in vacuum. Interestingly, they have the potential to destabilize bilateral relations with neighbors and turn into traditional security concerns. The traditional and non-traditional security threat emanating from the security environment in our Southeast are known to many of our agencies, and they are preparing accordingly to avoid surprise. It can be said that they are preparing what is happening now, but possibly not what is lurking around the corner. If you recall about the ISIL, they created havoc. The West and everybody was concerned. How many of them are there? 10,000, 20,000, 30,000? But think about this. They did not suffer. Their family did not suffer. They came from pretty decent background. And what monster they became, you have all noticed, the world has noticed. Now, let us fathom, or try to fathom. There are 400,000 children growing up in the refugee camp, in Rohingya refugee camp, without hope and dream, without proper education. Many of them seen horrors of their life. In 2017, many of them seen their mothers being violated. For them, there is no bottom line. What these people going to turn into, we have no ideas. And if they are exploited, and if we do not address this, by 2030, all of them or many of them will be adult. So homeless, with trauma in their minds and hatred in their heart, without proper education, hope, and dream. As I said, it is unthinkable what the situation is coming or lurking around the corner. There are two options. We can address it now or address later when it becomes a full-grown or full-blown security situation. As a student of security studies, I understand it's coming. It's not going to be a problem of Bangladesh alone. It will have regional and global ramifications. It's going to be too big a burden for Bangladesh to handle, where she is just a victim of geopolitical circumstance. I have a set of recommendations. Rohingya issues cannot be reconstructed on bilateral basis. It has to be considered on a global basis. This is a political problem created by Myanmar, and they try to address it militarily. Bangladesh is not a party to it, neither the Rohingyas. They are also victim of the circumstances. And Bangladesh is a prisoner of geography. It is recommended that Rohingya issue is addressed in 3 tiers. First, it should be within the ambit of global governance, international legal framework, and principles to arrive at a political solution. At regional and extra-regional level, involvement of regional organizations like ASEAN, BIMSTEC would be of paramount importance. Then involvement of China, India, Japan, and Korea would be instrumental. At bilateral level, Dhaka should maintain engagement with NEPIDO, however traumatic it may be. Meanwhile, the inability of Dhaka and Rohingya organization to meaningfully engage national unity government or NND-led national unity government in the center, then United League of Arakan or Arakan Army in Rakhine State may be expensive in future. Subsequently, a substantial track to engagement with them could provide a dividend out of proportion to the effort expended in resolving the Rohingya issue sustainably. Under the circumstances, both NUG and ULA/Arakan Army have expressed their willingness to engage. However, the proposition is risky and the cautiousness of Dhaka and Rohingyas is understandable. Nonetheless, we have to remember that windows of opportunity will never remain open for infinity. Finally, $1 million question. Are the opportunities for Rohingyas slipping away? Thank you.
Thank you, General Mahfouz. I think you gave us a very good description of the various security issues involved, particularly regionally. And this is going to help us take the discussion forward further. And also you gave us some suggestions about how to handle the situation, how to look at it, and the urgency of doing those things. Thank you very much. And next, we have Dr. Niloy Ranjan Biswas, Associate Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. Is going to speak on Rohingyas and the emerging non-traditional security challenges. So I'd like to draw the attention of the speakers to try to keep it slightly brief, take less time than was actually allotted to you because we are slightly behind schedule. Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Dr. Niloy.
Thank you. Thank you. Respected chief guest of the event, chair of the session, and Honorable Director General of PACE, thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here. I think a small disclaimer is, speaking about the non-traditional security challenges on the Rohingya issues is perhaps the first challenge for the speaker within 10 minutes, but I'll try to do, and even you have asked to finish it before 10 minutes, so I'll try to do myself. And the discussion is obviously not a very detailed pictures within the time span, but try to provide the broad overview of what traditional or non-traditional security challenges that we have at this moment on the side. That includes both Rohingyas as FDMNs and also the local host community. Now, as I'm an academic and a student of the security studies broadly, I think the first question that we need to ask is whose security are we talking about when we are talking about non-traditional security challenges? And particularly what kind of security threats? Because in the security studies paradigm, we normally do these binary divisions between traditional and non-traditional, and traditional being the state focus and non-traditional being the human being focus. Now, when we are talking about the security challenges in the 21st century, when we are going back to the conventional warfare again in the European front, and there are conflicts which are still going on in other regions, I think the biggest challenge is, can we really make these divisions between traditional and non-traditional only on the basis of the state and non-state actors? So some of the non-traditional challenges are mostly focusing on the person itself or the human being and the society. So of course, the Rohingyas, forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals, and the host communities are mostly at the target. Nevertheless, we need to make the nuances when we are talking about one particular issue, and they might have different implications when we are talking about the host community and also the FDMNs. In our case, it is the Rohingyas. Issues, for example, crimes, drugs, human trafficking, access to justice, health, food, education, skills, migration, law and order issues are mostly the non-traditional security challenges, and we have the implications in our own case here in broader Cox's Bazar areas. But at the same time, the major question would be, aren't the state is also affected in this case? Or is it only between the state and the human being, because it is also transnational in nature? My respected previous speaker has already established this argument that this crisis is not a bilateral in nature. This crisis has a regional implication. And some of the, or most of the non-traditional security challenges are also very much transnational in nature. So when we are talking about the way forward, this is a multi-stakeholder process. Now, some of the issues that if we look at the non-traditional security challenges from the protection racket or protection services, what protections have been offered so far as now in collaboration with the government of Bangladesh and our international development partners, we see that they have considered roughly or close to 100,000 Rohingya people. And from particularly 2018, there was a local demand to also consider at least 25% of the host community among these protection services. So according to their statement, there are 541,000 local population host community are also under the protection services. Now, if you look at the demography, there are 48% male and 51% female among the FDMN population, and almost 50% in each side in the host community. So they are under the protection services when we are talking about some of the non-traditional basic needs of the population, includes law and order, food, health, security, and everything. In the 2021, there's a pledge of about 881 million, and we'll see that how in the last couple of years, the percentages of unmet needs are still at a critical point. So the next slide is about the food and the basic necessities. And it also gives us an idea how a significant portion of what is expected that is to be met by the international development actors and the government who are involved over there are still lagging behind. For example, in 2018, the joint response plan says that they have only raised 72% of what they have expected. And in 2021, it was less than even 1/3 or close to 1/3 of that. So that means that when the overall expectation is, I think, met for about 2/3, that is having severely affecting on the allotments in most of the basic needs that is given to the FDMN population and also to the local population. So food was severely affected by 44%, clothing almost 50%, healthcare is 50%, and education was suffered, for example, 60% of what they have expected and what they have received. And this is not only the FDMN population, it also affected the local host communities, because there was a rising expectation that most of these non-traditional demands that were raised, that would also help the local population over there as well. We all talked about the climate risk, which is very significant for us. We knew, and there was an official statistics that said nearly 8,000 hectares of the local forest land and hill areas were affected to accommodate and give them shelters since 2017 onwards. Now, that obviously make the region susceptible or vulnerable to natural disasters. Now, throughout these last 5 years, deep tube wells were established to ensure drinking water, which is very important, we can understand. But that also created a risk of lower level of the groundwater and vulnerable to landslide and sinkholes. Huge impacts on the elements and local habitats. We all can understand in the alone year of, or in the alone month of July 2019, there were 26 landslide events, and the total number in the last couple of years, particularly during monsoon, is very significant. Now, this might affected the camp areas, but we can obviously understand the overall disaster in the environment that were there has also affected the local community quite significantly. Law and order issues, and perhaps quite significantly, we all have been following the news media, drug issues, human trafficking, fake identity, organized crime, and armed violence. Undocumented movements are quite a few issues, and we can talk hours and hours on those issues. But I think one thing that we need to understand is that do we need to oversensitize and securitize some of the issues which might affect and side away the individual and their needs to remain in a safe and secure environment in camp and host communities, rather than oversensitize or securitize the issue. Of course, we understand, and across the countries where there is a refugee environment, security is a very important issue. There is no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean we need to identify a particular region, including the displaced community and the host community and over securitize the event and criminalize them as a community. It is very important for us to consider that what are the root causes of it. And in most of the cases, we still find that the instabilities in our neighboring region and country particularly has also instigated some of the very non-traditional issues. The one that I was mentioning, that non-traditional doesn't mean it always resides within the state. So we have to also consider those issues significantly. We have been facing economic issues in those areas, and again, the FDMN themselves and also the local host communities. For example, when the issues started, a lot of international actors went over there. House rent went high in Cox's Bazar areas for 120%, price hike of the daily amenities, and that particularly affected the local host communities. I remember a few of our colleagues at Dhaka University, we collected 225 micro-narratives during 18-19 and then 2021 of the host communities and the Rohingya FDMNs. And that quite importantly mentioned that how the daily economic needs were affected since 2017 onwards. There were lower wage for the local host community and because of the labor market situation. And there was, of course, a demand for natural resources sharing when the Rohingya population came to these areas. Now, what does it mean? That do have to really take into consideration the economic issues. And of course, there are different dimensions for both the FDMN communities and also the host communities over there. So maybe a common policy is a bit difficult. So we need to consider, economic recovery plans differently. Education, there are significant improvements. And although we have seen that when there was a funding shortage, education sector was affected. Education for the whole FDMN communities and also education for the local host communities, particularly for the Rohingya children. More than 400,000 children out of 1 million refugees that we can consider at this moment. And still there are 100,000 children missing from the number, and that data is coming from UNICEF and other agencies who are working in collaboration with the government. There are more than 3,400 learning centers. Myanmar curriculum is the basic of the skill development plans at this moment. Nevertheless, what will happen after grade 9, or what will happen the young people who will pass grade 9 and then move towards more, there is a demand for these skills, skill-based education at this level. This is a big question because it is not only about the right, it is also about the strategic issues, and it is also linked with their future when we are expecting there will be a safe and secure repatriation to Myanmar. The health issue is an interesting success story with some caveats. In 2018 and 19, the major health issues were respiratory issues, unexplained fevers, acute diarrhea, and a few others. Now, the experiences that the health workers that have both government and international has actually helped us to contain the health issues during the COVID period. So if we look at or compare the data over here, because of the time constraint, I'm not going into details, we could see that within the camp, successfully,
I'd like to draw your attention to the time.
Yes, I'm finishing in 1 minute, sir. So the infection was contained, and the number of the deaths, isolation, and in other cases were quite low, other than what it was suspected when there was COVID the situation was going on. Nevertheless, health issues are still very important, particularly when we are talking about critical health issues, and there is a need for referral from the camp-based medical facilities towards a more city or Cox's Bazar-based better health facilities. Now, finally, we have been also discussing about undocumented migration, particularly maritime migration, and this particularly establishes the fact that non-traditional security or undocumented movement is not within a country matter. So we have experiences of 3,500 desperate Rohingya people's movement over the sea in only 2022. There were significant cases where Rohingyas were found in Indonesia and Malaysia. 348 individuals were missing. And if we do not really address this at this moment, and we only consider this within the perspective of the state, this might also create a havoc in future as well, because it's very difficult to constrain them within the camps always. Finally, I'm not going to attempt way forward. It's just repeating the question, will prolonged stay increase the security challenges? Of course, it will increase the non-traditional security challenges. We need to understand this crisis is transnational in nature. Therefore, the non-traditional security issues that we discuss have roots in different other places or countries. And of course, these are non-traditional in nature, transitional in nature. Context is very important. We often forget host community. Host community is a very important factor over here when we are talking about the protection services on the non-traditional issues. Coordination is very important. We have been having that experience, but it needs to be strengthened. Repatriation is still and the most important option for us. We are talking about safe and sustainable. And finally, we need to desecuritize and we need to avoid oversensitize some of the issues and consider the security situation of the people, both the FDMNs and the local host community.
Thank you,
so
Dr.
much.
Niloy. Thank you very much. It was quite comprehensive, I think. You have touched on various aspects of non-traditional security. And from whatever you said, certain things came out quite clearly. That it's very important to establish trust, confidence, and satisfaction. Because if we can address all the needs of the people, both inside the camp and outside, then these things will happen and it will be easier to handle the situation. So those are very important observations. And our next speaker is ASM Tariq Hassan Semul. Is going to speak on Myanmar and the Rohingyas, the political economy of arms and business. He is an in-house speaker. And so I will be a little stricter on him about time. Semul, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Honorable Chief Guest, respected Director General, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Very good morning to you all still. I will be brief with my presentation because we have the time shortage. So we were listening to the security challenges that might that has happened since the last influx in 2017, Rohingya influx. And I will try to, get your attention towards another aspect of it, that is the justice. The global structure or the international regime that we have in the post-Second World War, and we have passed the Cold War and then the unipolar moment of US. And now we are in a world where we expect that there will be justice for any kind of crimes against humanity. There will be justice against, any kind of, violence against humanity. But in Myanmar's case, specifically in Rohingya's case, we have seen that that has not happened during the last influx. We have seen that. And Bangladesh has been looking for that justice since then. So, what actually happened with Myanmar, that was not very much unpredictable. The way Myanmar actually tried to kind of democratize its system, there was, a debate that whether Myanmar had that kind of social rubric or fabric to have a democracy in the early 2000s when its military dictators wanted to democratize Myanmar. And during that time, we have seen that the Western countries, led by the US, United States, and many other Western countries, they started to kind of go soft on their sanctions. And in 2016, US lifted up its sanction against Myanmar following the election. And the reason was cited as Myanmar has made a long stride in path of democracy. Then when 2017 influx happened, when Bangladesh actually called for justice and to stop this kind of violence within Myanmar, there was a hesitancy among the international community, especially from the Western countries, that any kind of punitive measure against Myanmar might actually backfire, and that might actually destabilize the Aung San Suu Kyi's regime. So that was one of the major reasons that immediately international community did not respond with sanctions and all that. We can see that sanctions started to come around 2018, 2019 under Trump regime. There were some targeted sanctions against some military leaders and some groups, and those targeted sanctions started to come, but yet, we haven't seen that much energy regarding taking a strong step against Myanmar in terms of punitive measure. And in 2017, our State Minister for Foreign Affairs actually criticized this approach from international community, saying that this is a business as usual approach. And our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, mentioned that in a parliament for the first time around 2018-19, and again in 2019 during dialogue, Dhaka Global Dialogue, actually organized by BISS itself, I mean, not very far from here. She mentioned that Rohingya problem is a security problem for Bangladesh. So that's the, I mean, first and second time Bangladesh kind of identified Rohingya problem as a security problem for Bangladesh. But what happened during, I mean, in February 2021, followed that, we have plethora of sanctions that has been issued by different countries. And I'm going to the main crux of my arguments, the arms and businesses later, just to elaborate on that point on sanctions. In 20th February, latest sanctions came from EU, and it was issued against 9 persons and 7 entities recently. And those including Ministry of Energy and Department of Defense and many other subsidiaries under the military regime. And another sanction was issued in 31st January 2023. Anthony Blinken, under an executive order, he said that some 18 individuals and 30 entities to deprive the regime of the means of perpetuate its violence and to promote the democratic aspirations of Myanmar people. In that objective, US slapped these sanctions. These sanctions came. Now, the question is, many academics argued that the sanction doesn't work. For example, for 3 decades, Myanmar has been a country that is fighting the sanctions. Whether these sanctions will work or not, that we have to understand, and how these sanctions can work. And now I will draw your attention towards a report that came out in 2022, when we are saying that there is a symbiosis relationship between different industries and arms and weapons purchased by Myanmar. I mean, they started to pop up in different reports. One such report came out in August 2022, and this report was published by Justice for Myanmar. And this report suggests that more than 100 companies, a third of them are registered in Singapore. These 100 companies are actually in business relationship with the Myanmar establishment. And a total of 116 private companies actually helped the Myanmar army to purchase weapons through different subsidiaries and third parties. And 31 has still active since the coup. So they didn't start, I mean, they didn't stop, and they are actually operating to provide weapons to Myanmar army. And most of these companies which were reported in this report, they actually worked outside of Myanmar. So this kind of scenario gives us a scenario that we are living in a globalized world where different countries actually can operate and different companies can operate outside these sanctions. Because we didn't actually have any kind of coordinated multilateral sanctions against Myanmar, it is very easy for these companies to work through subsidiaries and third-party countries from other countries, why these sanctions doesn't work. And another report that actually came out a few days ago, that is one of the biggest report. Our national dailies actually took that report and published several reports based on that. That came out on 16 January 2023. That report was published by Special Advisory Council for Myanmar, SAC-M, and this report was made by 3 UN high officials. They were rapporteurs in different capacities under the UN. And they identified several countries, and they also claimed that these countries' governments actually may or may not know about the linkages of these companies, of their countries, which the countries belongs to their company, with the Myanmar government. For example, Austria was named one of Austria's weapon producing country, private company GF Inster, and they produced machinery that has been now used by the Myanmar military factories, weapon producing factories, that is the Kapasa factories, known as Kapasa factories. And these factories are actually making gun barrels, and other things that has been sometimes get refurbished and repaired in Taiwan. knowingly or unknowingly from the Austrian government. And then China and Singapore supplied raw materials such as copper and iron. Those were very critical to continue the weapon production in Myanmar. And then fuses and electrical detonators came from India and Russia. I mean, we all know the submarine that Myanmar received from China and India, Russia and India that we all know. But there are other parts and components that has been used in Myanmar's factories to produce these weapons. And interestingly, Western countries like Germany, Japan, and US, including Ukraine, their machinery high precision machinery has been used in the weapon production in factories in Myanmar. So these private subsidiaries and private companies are working out, from these Western countries and through third parties, and somehow Myanmar is benefiting out of it. And then software programs.
To conclude.
Yeah. And software and programs that has been used within these machines, some of them are produced in France and Israel. And Singapore has been very interestingly, worked as a transit hub. And many countries are actually kind of, through Singapore, they are actually funneling the funding and funneling the money to buy this weapon and sell this weapon to Myanmar. So the concluding remark, I would argue that the real politics has been triumphant over justice and liberal values, although US and Western countries are talking about the rule-based order in this Indo-Pacific region. But still, using globalization and, using the lack of coordinated sanctions, these companies and private companies are doing businesses with Myanmar, which are in return inflicting security and creating security challenges in this region. And we have seen that the skirmishes that is going on in the Rakhine state in recent times, and the Tatmadaw has been using these weapons. So I think it will be very prudent to find out a solution towards a coordinated and multilateral sanctions that might actually stop that kind of financing to the Myanmar army and Myanmar regime. Thank you so much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Tarek. I think it was a very useful presentation, giving us an idea about the double talk by various parties involved and how they say something and then do something else and not trying to help the situation really. So we expect the countries who are in a position to help to change their behavior and come and try to resolve the situation in collaboration with the countries involved. Thank you, Tarek. The next speaker, the last designated speaker is Dr. Delwar Hussain, member, Bangladesh Public Service Commission and Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. He's going to speak on Rohingya crisis and security concerns, response strategy of Bangladesh. Dr. Delwar.
Thank you. Thank you, respected chair, honorable chief guest of the seminar, and respected Director General of BISS, and my fellow and learned speakers, respected participants and guests. Assalamu alaikum. The previous speakers have actually covered the first part of my presentation, that is Rohingya crisis and security concerns. But I'll try to still just to give you a sort of cursory kind of look at security concern aspects. And so later on, actually, I'll focus on the response strategy, I think, which is very important focus of the seminar. And I believe BISS has organized a seminar on a very timely and very relevant issue for Bangladesh and for the whole world. One of the ways to define the crisis, I consider that it is a domestic problem of Myanmar with bilateral, regional, and global consequences, and we are facing it. And Bangladesh has sheltered Rohingyas, the population which is almost equivalent to Mauritius, and it is also population which is a combined population of Bhutan and Maldives. So you can understand what kind of challenge that Bangladesh has taken in 2017. And also, we can understand the very crux of the issue of understanding security challenges and also response strategy. If we follow what our Honorable Prime Minister delivered in the last UN General Assembly debate on 23rd September 2022, where she expressed her sort of frustration. At the same time, she also defined the new situation that has been created to see the problem, to see the crisis from a different outlook. And you can see that I mean, she has very rightly focused that the ongoing political turmoil and armed conflicts in the country, that is Myanmar, has made the repatriation of displaced Rohingyas more difficult. I hope the UN will play an effective role in this regard. It gives us some understanding, some idea of our response. And then, of course, no crisis and no security challenge could be understood without understanding the context. And particularly in the case of Myanmar, if we do not understand the domestic factors that actually have led to Myanmar to create such kind of humanitarian disaster, not only with the Rohingyas, even the people who are living in Myanmar, around 40% of ethnic people in Myanmar are suffering a lot because of the kind of very repressive political structure that has been created over the decades, particularly since 1962. And also we can see that the nature of the state of Myanmar, which has been using systematic torture and repression, and it has denied the identity. And you know that the Rohingyas are not included in 135 recognized ethnic groups. So this is very, very discriminatory attitude and policy. And instead, they used sort of stigma and misinformation to define the Rohingyas. And of course, ethnic cleansing and genocide also are part of the Myanmar state. And also, regional context has been also explained by the first speaker. And we cannot avoid these factors which are determining a new landscape of security in our vicinity. The rise of China and India, salience of Indo-Pacific region, which is very, very important to understand every issue and concern in this part of the world. So what we see, we are actually returning to the old days of the Cold War, and where actually things have become much more complex. Even the diplomacy and also geopolitics has become much more complicated. And 2017, we know how the Rohingyas came under the persecution by the Myanmar regime, and now the population of the Rohingyas in 1.2 million in Bangladesh. So consequences of the crisis, of course, the mass exodus, and it is continuing even today. It has created humanitarian concerns through statelessness, ethnic cleansing, and violation of human rights. It has created multiple challenges for Bangladesh: economic, social, security, and environmental. It has posed moral and ethical questions to the global community. And again, we can refer to what our Honorable Prime Minister said in a high-level side meeting in the UN in 2022, where she has very clearly defined the problem of Rohingya crisis as a sort of security challenge. And she mentioned Bangladesh has also been carrying the load in terms of societal demographic balance, domestic and regional security, and the combat against violent extremism. So if we want to understand the security concern, of course, we have to look at the issues. And most of the issues have been discussed: political, strategic security, and there are issues of threat of radicalization and violent extremism, maintaining safety and order in the camps, instability, continuing forced displacement from Myanmar. And we can also see from some literature that we can find from the media, there's sort of nexus between Myanmar regime, militancy, and drug. And military coup in Myanmar on February 1st also created a new situation, and Myanmar's violations of Bangladesh border in 2022. And we know economic security, how the global community has reduced humanitarian assistance to the Rohingyas, which is now, I mean, in 2022, it is about only 38% of total required fund. And it has social and health security dimension, particularly social dimension, which we have seen rising crimes, drug and narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, social unrest, and particularly widening of host community and Rohingyas gap. And also we can identify the challenges from levels of analysis. We can see local level sort of implications where resource safety and security are important. National level concerns, security, economy and environment, bilateral, sub-regional, regional and global. So challenges for Bangladesh, it has created sort of long-term diplomatic predicament for Bangladesh. We have been trying so hard to convince Myanmar and also global community, but we have seen that there has not been much substantive progress. And Myanmar continues to circulate false claims about the Rohingyas in terms of the identity and also their activities. And Bangladesh seems to be becoming a demographic dumping ground when 1.2 million Rohingyas are here and without any visible prospect of repatriation. So it is a serious matter, not only for Bangladesh, for the whole region. And also we can see deliberate negligence by regional powers and also global powers. There have been some very symbolic sanctions, which are not really giving enough pressure on Myanmar. So how Bangladesh responded? I mean, our immediate response from Bangladesh in 2017, of course, it was a humanitarian support. We have seen extraordinary gesture from our Honorable Prime Minister, who is known as Mother of Humanity, and you can see what she said in 2017. If we can feed 160 million people, we can also feed an additional 5 lakh to 7 lakh people at their time of distress. If necessary, we will eat 1 meal a day and share another meal with these distressed people. After all, we are human beings and we stand for mankind. This is the crux of our response, our strategy, or our, I would say, which is very, very different.
Please conclude.
Oh, no, I'm supposed to have some more minutes. Yeah. Okay, so our response is based on this very principle, friendship to all, malice towards none. And also what I have seen, I mean, our response can be divided into 2 phases. In the first phase, of course, the Prime Minister declared 5-point demand in the UN General Assembly debate, and the focus was to stop the violence in Rakhine. And we provided temporary shelters and we mobilized public opinion, building national consensus. And the phase 2, which is very complex, we have seen 3 developments: COVID-19 pandemic, military coup in Myanmar, and the Ukraine war. And there is a growing uncertainty for the repatriation. So you can see in the second phase, of course, we are coming up with a very strong diplomatic posture, but global situations have changed, and that has made our work very, very difficult. And so we have some fundamental stance in our response, supporting the Rohingya people and the permanent solution to the crisis and repatriation. And so what are the basic elements of our response strategy? What I have found that, of course, humanitarianism is the #1 element, and then non-coercion and diplomacy and pragmatism. These 3 actually constitute the basic parameters of our response. And so we have conducted bilateral diplomacy, trilateral diplomacy, and we have bolstered multilateral diplomacy. And there are also misperceptions. There are people who think about quick fix of the problem, which is not possible. And also we have seen a misunderstanding and misperception about this issue. And And this part is very important. What are the outcomes of our response strategies? What I have found in my research that over the last 5 years and more, we have been able to ensure global humanitarian support for the Rohingyas, however insufficient. And we have been able to engage Myanmar with this problem. Myanmar cannot do away with this issue. And we have increased global empathy and engagement. And we have also created sort of multi-level involvement of civil society actors. And we have been able to mainstream the issue of repatriation, although it is not happening, but we could have been able to sensitize the world on this issue. And we have created a situation where there is an opportunity to question the policies and attitude of big powers. And also recognition of genocide and ethnic cleansing, not only by the UN, also by the US and other great powers. So what is to be done? Of course, we have to ensure repatriation of the Rohingyas, and we have to protect camps and other areas, making world aware of the new threats in the region. That is the crux of our Prime Minister's speech in the UN, and our narrative and our focus is that we need to make the world aware of the new threats and emphasizing the special role of China and India. And we have to ensure global humanitarian assistance, which is in decline. We have to combine bilateral and multilateral diplomatic negotiations and engagements. National capacity building is very important. Expediting the temporary relocation to Bhasanchar and long-term camp management is very important. We know that it is becoming a protracted and intractable crisis. And we have to ensure safety, welfare, and livelihoods of local community. And ending civil wars in Myanmar is also very important. And in the conclusion, well, there is no doubt about the fact that adverse consequences of neglecting the plight of the Rohingyas in the context of Ukraine war and other geopolitical developments, we can visibly see a sort of negligence. And this is a very costly negligence, not only for Bangladesh, for the entire region. That we have to understand. And repatriation is the key to our response strategy. And of course, it may look very normative, but we have to mainstream again and again the humanitarian cause or civilizational cause over geopolitics. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for a very comprehensive coverage of the whole issue. And you have drawn attention to many of the important statements of the Honorable Prime Minister, which is very relevant here because she has been handling this issue with a lot of courage and vision. As you said, that she mentioned that if we can feed the huge population of Bangladesh, we can feed a few more people. But at the same time, we're all worried from, even from her own statement, we're all worried about the security threats that emanate from this situation. So thank you very much for your presentation. We have come to the end of the designated presentations. Now we have time for some open discussion, but since we are running short of time, we are going to cut it down slightly. Originally, we had 35 minutes. I think we are going to do 20 minutes of discussions. And here, what I'll do is we'll take 6 questions. 2 of those questions will be on Zoom from outside. People have been watching this program on Zoom as well. So we'll also take a couple of questions on Zoom. And the other 4, 5 questions will be from here in this room. So can I have a show of hands, people who want to ask the questions? I can see 2 hands in front. There I can see 2 more hands. So 2 here. Huh? Oh, so 5 hands I have already noted. Here, Professor Hussain here. And then we have General Amsa Amin, and then we have the 2, I forget the names, my good friends, 3 actually there and 1 here. So total of 6 here, and we'll take 2 more from the Zoom. So first, let's have Professor Hussain.
Thank you, distinguished chair, for giving me the floor. I do not have really any specific question to the specific question to the distinguished presenters. But I thank them profusely for bringing up the Rohingya crisis in its true perspective. And I have only three key comments, which might, I think, would help the paper presenters to clarify the idea. First of all, Rohingya crisis is certainly a multifaceted crisis. And the paper readers have sufficiently and cogently argued that this is a multifaceted problem. And it could be social, demographic, economic, security, environmental, even ecological. And I would like to add that this is a security problem, both nationally and internationally. Second, Bangladesh should have followed a proactive diplomacy in sorting out this problem, which Bangladesh has not yet done. Take, for example, Srimati Indira Gandhi between September and November traveled through most of the Western capitals to talk about the Bangladesh crisis. And that's how she motivated a large section of the public about sympathizing with the Bangladesh crisis. I have always been arguing that Bangladesh, especially Bangladesh Prime Minister, should talk personally to Russia, China, and India, and which has not yet been done. The personal touch of the diplomacy is certainly something which can do wonder of the world. So, and in this case, I also mentioned Ghiyasuddin Azam Shah, the independent Sultan of Bengal between 1393 and 1410. I call him the father of small-scale diplomacy in the history of Bengal. He followed cultural diplomacy with Persia. He followed political diplomacy with China. He followed.
Sir, can we keep it short, please?
Well, okay, I'm coming to the end. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ghiyasuddin Azam Shah is a good example for us to follow. Even India. Whenever I go to Delhi to attend a conference, I stay at the India Cultural Center. They have a big establishment for conducting cultural diplomacy. Number three, permanent solution to the Rohingya crisis is ending the Praetorian military rule in Myanmar. For this, the whole world has to be active, not only Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Sorry for having disturbed you, but we have a little time constraint. Can we take the next question from Zoom? Our technical helps here. Azad? আছে কি আমাদের জুমে কেউ আছে?
আমি আছি।
হ্যাঁ?
ব্রিগেডিয়ার সাখাওয়াত।
আর জি ব্রিগেডিয়ার সাখাওয়াত, আপনি আপনার প্রশ্ন রাখেন প্লিজ।
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. It was definitely an illuminating discussion and talk. But I haven't heard, to be very frank, what are we going to do in mitigating this crisis, Rohingya crisis, which is not ours. It is between Rohingya and Myanmar. I haven't heard anybody talking about in detail the opportunities or difficulties or the security difficulties is unfolded by the Burma Act. And it definitely provides an opportunity for us. Also, it puts us in a difficult condition in geopolitical situation. But then, what do we do to resolve this Rohingya issue? We have to definitely look at the NUG. At the same time, we have to look at the Arakan army, which General Mahfouz has talked about. And also we have to look at the opportunities that Burma Act is providing. Otherwise, we have tried Eastern approach. We have tried with India, we have tried with China, but it's 6 years running. So do we have this option? Should we consider this option or not? This has not been discussed. And I believe this is a very, very important issue now that we are going to face. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. The next question from General Amsami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also thank the learned panel. You've actually gone into pretty good depth. And I also wish from the Honorable Minister to have some very thoughtful ideas about the legal implications relating to national security. I'll make a short comment and I'll seek the panel to respond to it. I'll speak from the standpoint of national interest and national security. I won't go into the details because Mr. Chair would not allow me to do that, to full respect to the chair. One of the speakers talked about the diplomatic predicament. True. But I'd like to take you back to our geographical predicament and historical predicament with Rohingyas and Myanmar. The root of the problems lies there. Burma Act created by the British, as Brigadier Sakhaut talked about, and now it has been renewed by the US recently. But the history goes back, far back. The geographic predicament is where Bangladesh stands geographically, our borders. Our policy making has to be very thoughtful about that. The difficulties of the geographic location of Bangladesh, and in this case, Arakan itself, which happens to be part of Myanmar. It could have been otherwise. Historically, we know the origin of Arakan, Rohingyas start with probably the Mughals. The British ruled for a long time, and now the Myanmar does not recognize them. What diplomacy will work when the existence of huge manpower population is not recognized at all by the state? What diplomacy are you talking about? Now, keeping this in mind, where does Bangladesh national interest and national security stand? And what should be our approach? Should we have a national security approach or not? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we've had 3 questions. We'll take the other questions, but please. And now we will see if the panelists want to say something on this, especially on the issue raised by Brigadier Shekhawat about the how to react to the Burma Act and other international predicaments. Would General Mahfouz like to take it, please?
I was talking about this, that brute force only reacts to brute force. issues. So we got to understand that we are dealing. They are very smart set of people. This is number one. Number two, they have tested us. How do you respond? Do you recall? In various times they have tested. In 1991, they have tested how do you react with violence. With impunity, they captured one of our outposts and we react. This is one. Number two, in 2016, they sent about 90,000 people. This was a prelim operation to test the one community and in particular Bangladesh out there. And finally, all I'm trying to say is that we lacked credible military reference. Had we had credible military reference, Myanmar military would have got 7 times. When I say credible military reference, I say some of our equipment militarily should have better than that of the potential advanced person. Like that. I'd like to check this with one of the historical issue of Singapore. When Singapore was being developed, the primary agenda was economic emancipation, development, better life for the people, same as ours. But at the same time, at that time, Lee Kuan Yew was developing a credible reference force. People ask Lee Kuan Yew, how come this is contradictory? You are saying your primary agenda is this economic development, but you're also dealing with making a credible reference force. This is not.
Thank you, General Mahfood. I think we understand your point here. Yes, please. You want to say something, please?
Thank you. I think on the issue of Burma or what US has been doing, I mean, not only Burma, US recognized genocide, but there is scope to question the intention of the United States. Is it really to support the Rohingyas, or they have the larger enemy, China, to contain that through the proxy kind of situation that Bangladesh should become part by strongly supporting this Burma? Because if they really support the Rohingyas of Bangladesh, they could create a sort of possible type of situation for the Myanmar, but they have not done it. Because few days ago we have seen the report that 13 companies are actually arming Myanmar, and most of them are from the Western countries. So actually, when we talk about their policies in the current context, we have to think about the interest of those parties who actually are professing certain policies or certain actions that whether we become part of that or not. And also, I think I have mentioned in my presentation that we need sort of national capacity building, but which we definitely will gradually is happening, because in the last 5-hour ranking, we have improved our position to the 14th in ranking. But I think, of course, as a teacher and academic, I believe that the kind of policy we are pursuing based on diplomacy, based on non-coercive mechanisms, I think it's more effective than the deterrence. Of course, deterrence, you can see military deterrence is very high stake kind of game. And for that actually we are not prepared. In fact, even if we have that kind of capacity, whether we use that, I think there should be a question. So we have to think about cost and benefits of using those kind of perspectives. That's why actually
Thank you.
I think Bangladesh is continuing the approach, and I think this approach is helping Bangladesh.
Thank you, Dr. Delwar. I think that last word you said, cost-benefit analysis. I think we have not been doing too badly, and the policy that the father of the nation gave us, friendship with all but malice to none, and that we have used quite well during the last decade or so. And I think we should continue on that, and we should, wherever possible, avoid military confrontations. If something is imposed on us, then we fight back. we have to have the capacity. We need military capacity, but we are not going to create conflicts. We're going to try and resolve conflicts. I think that is our policy. And there are many countries in the world who have done quite well without being militarily aggressive. I don't think we want to go there. But anyways, these are all very important thoughts. And what Professor Hossain said earlier, I think we all agree with him that there is a need for greater effort in the diplomatic front. Whether it will be the Prime Minister who will go out or not is something that the government will decide. But definitely there is room for further diplomatic effort, more, how should I put it, bigger diplomatic efforts. And also, we also agree with what General Amsamin said, that it is very unfortunate that the Myanmarese authorities have completely denied citizenship to the Rohingyas, have de-recognized them. And this is very sad, and that is one of the important issues that needs to be resolved before this issue can be permanently resolved. We all talk about the Kofi Annan report, and I think we can find some solutions there. And our Honorable Prime Minister actually mentioned this during her first speech after the events in 2017 at the UN General Assembly, and those remain very valid even today. So with those words, let's take a couple of more questions here. At the back, the two hands there. Sorry that I forget my friend's name. Please come first.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Honorable Session Chair.
But please also give your identity.
This is Salahuddin Ahmed. I was a member of Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission, and now I now run a program titled
a brief question, please.
It's Nice to Be Nice. I noted a point from the deliberations of Lieutenant General retired Dr. Rahman. He was mentioning that my question is, should we not, or how can we stress more on the fact that the Rohingya children who are going to attain adulthood in 7 or 8 years from now, each of them is going to be a living bomb or a living explosive. So mentioning about this potential threat, regional and global threat, can we not bring more on our side, the countries like Japan, China, and stressing this more, I think we can bring them on our side. I made my question brief, expecting that I have a foreign attendee here. Please give him also 1 minute if possible, that he wanted to pose a question also. Thank you very much.
Who's the foreign attendee here?
Yes,
please.
Please.
Well, I think some of the issues have been addressed. My name is Jorge Martinez. I'm the head of WHO in Cox's Bazar. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Niloy to mention quickly about the health issues, how was mitigated. And also he mentioned COVID. Let me be clear, it's not only COVID, cholera, etc. When we have a break cholera in Dhaka, we were able to control it in Cox's Bazar and able. So that's been taken care of. No, but my comment was more regarding India and China. I mean, we, including Mr. Tarek, we're talking about other panelists. We keep talking about the Western countries, but how much then is the responsibility as well of the regional, as you mentioned, India, China, and Singapore? I mean, what other techniques are we using to address these three major parties that are need to be directly involved?
Thank you, sir. I think I'll just, before I go to the next question, I'll address this issue a little. That is, you are very right that these countries are very important in finding a solution. China, India, and Singapore. There are other countries as well. But I think all of us, many of us think that these countries have some very important stakes in Myanmar, which they think they might lose if they try to resolve this issue and try to send the Rohingyas back to Myanmar. But our efforts should be geared to explaining to them that these problems, the Myanmar issue and the overall the civil war throughout Myanmar, is actually hampering their interests in Myanmar. They have a lot of investments and other stakes, and these will only be secure and productive if Myanmar becomes peaceful. And one of the conditions for that peace is for ending this problem, issue of Rohingyas by rehabilitating them, by their rehabilitation and return and rehabilitation to their homeland with full dignity. Unless that happens, no one is protected, no investment is protected in Arakan region. So therefore, I think this is something that we should try to continue to try and explain to our friends in India, China, and Singapore that it is in their interest that this matter should be appropriately, justly, fairly resolved. With that, I'll take the last question. I'm sorry that I cannot take any more questions except the last one here. Yes, please, you go ahead.
Two questions there. So my first question is about why are we not talking about ASEAN, because they have a significant role in terms of how the region acts and they can have potentially significant influence on Myanmar. And the second question is the right of the Palestinians.
Thank you, Maksud. I think the first question about ASEAN, why we are not, it is just that we have not mentioned it here, but ASEAN is in everybody's mind. When we talk about Singapore, ASEAN, the whole of ASEAN is in our mind. And then whenever ASEAN meetings take place, we try to involve we try to get some kind of a response from them in those meetings. And sometimes we have succeeded, sometimes we have not. But the effort is on. You should not feel bad that we are not involving ASEAN countries. Singapore, Indonesia, then Malaysia, Brunei, we are talking to them separately, but we're also talking to ASEAN as a group. And then as the train left, in diplomacy, the train never leaves. It is never too early, never too late. We continue so long as we do not achieve what we have to achieve. So we should not give up hope. We should not lose sight of the issue. We should continue to try. We must look at our shortcomings. There are many shortcomings, and we should look at those and try to continuously strengthen our efforts and continuously talk to our friends. And there is one issue that we have not mentioned too much, but that is that whatever we agree on, the international community, then the Myanmarese authorities and Bangladesh, we all agree on something. But if we are not able to convince the Rohingyas themselves that they will be safe, then they will not go. They will not want to go. So that trust has to be built. And what are the requirements for that, building that trust? That is something also we should be discussing. And that is, today we have not discussed it, but we must keep it in mind. So with those words, I think I'll bring this discussion to an end. And before I hand it over to the chief guest, I'd like to make one particular point really. I'm not going to go into a big discussion. That there is a lot of frustration. We have not succeeded with our efforts, and we do not see much ahead. But there are some recent developments. There may be some hope in those developments. One has been already mentioned by Brigadier Sakhawat, recent developments of the civil war in Myanmar, the birth of the national unity government, and the support that it is getting from various international community. And then they have been talking to some Rohingya people, we understand. The Arakan army is talking to them as well. And these show some rays of hope for us? Can there be some hope there? And then the US administration, the US designation of Rohingya displacement as genocide, I think that is an important development. which can be built upon. The Burma Act, as we mentioned, that can be utilized, but that is a kind of double-edged knife. So we should be careful when we try to utilize that. And then new sanctions by the EU. The other day we saw that EU has been putting in more sanctions. Can we work further on that area, that more sanctions should be placed against the junta? Progress in the cases in the international courts. This is something that we have not mentioned today in any of the presentations, but this is very important. That when we are trying to make progress in other places, the progresses that have been made so far in the three different cases in three different courts on this issue, some very important progresses have been made, because the Myanmar authorities tried to suggest that the court did not have any jurisdiction, but the court denied their appeal and said that the court has full jurisdiction in this matter. And so that is something that we should pursue on now, that make the cases, strengthen the cases and follow them seriously. Bangladesh has been from the very beginning doing quite well in helping the cases in the three different courts. And so maybe we'll hear more about that from the Honorable Chief Guest. And then anyways, I think I cannot read my own writing, whatever I wanted to say. So so yeah, that is true. So let us now hand it over to the Honorable Chief Guest. We are hoping that while he has got something already prepared, but he might also like to throw some light on the legal issues involved in the repatriation of the Rohingyas and their rights. And number two, the legal liabilities of the perpetrators of genocide and the legal responsibilities of the international community. Maybe this could give us new perspectives. Thank you, sir. Please bother you to make your speech now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable Chair of the session, Honorable Director General, BIISS, distinguished speakers, distinguished presence, representatives, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon. At the outset, I pay my profound respect to the memory of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and the valiant freedom fighters who made their supreme sacrifice in our war of liberation in 1971, and the 200,000 mothers and sisters tortured by the Pakistan Army. Also, I would like to pay my profound homage to those valiant sons of this land who sacrificed their lives on 21st February 1972 to ensure our right to speak in our mother language. I also pay respect to the memory of the 17 members of Bangabandhu's family brutally killed on 15th August 1975, and our 4 national leaders killed inside Dhaka Central Jail on 3rd November 1975. Distinguished presence, I thank the ISS for inviting me to this discussion on the very vital and multifaceted Rohingya crisis that Bangladesh is facing since long, particularly after the en masse forced displacement of Rohingyas into Bangladesh in October 2016 and August 2017. From time to time, Myanmar has pushed their ethnic minority, Rohingyas, to our land. The unprecedented magnitude of the inflow of Rohingyas after the terrible incidents in Rakhine in August 2017 created an accumulated figure of the Rohingyas sheltered in Bangladesh to about 1.2 million by now, with 32,000 newborns yearly. Despite numerous constraints and bitter past experience in repatriation, the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina decided to give shelter temporarily to such a massive number of forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals on humanitarian grounds, and thus saved thousands of innocent lives. The singular gesture has been recognized by the international community, and now the Honorable Prime Minister has been awarded the title of the Mother of Humanity. Distinguished audience, we have stepped into the 6th year of the prolonged Rohingya crisis last August without seeing a single forcibly displaced Myanmar national or Rohingya returning to their homeland, Rakhine, in absence of a conducive, safe, and secure environment. The Rohingya crisis is not a bilateral issue between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Bangladesh has been paying a very high price for this problem, formulated, orchestrated, originated, and executed in Myanmar. Sustainable solution of the Rohingya crisis lies with Myanmar, as was stated by our Honorable Prime Minister at successive United Nations General Assembly meetings. Distinguished presence, Bangladesh has always sought a durable solution to the Rohingya crisis peacefully through negotiations with Myanmar. The two countries signed 3 instruments after the exodus in 2017. 2 attempts were made in 2018 and 2019 to start repatriation, but were not successful as the selected Rohingyas were unwilling to join the process in the absence of an assured conducive environment in Rakhine, lack of sufficient assurances about their security, and livelihood opportunities by the Myanmar government upon return. Respected audience, Cox's Bazar is now hosting the largest camp in the world, with one of the largest humanitarian operations in terms of scale and dimension. Bangladesh has been trying its best with the international community's support to ensure the safety and well-being of the FDMNs. They are receiving food, shelter, healthcare, and other services. Even in the face of COVID-19 pandemic challenges, Bangladesh has included this population in our national vaccination program, and the COVID-19 infection was effectively controlled. However, the situation is increasingly becoming untenable in the camps in Bangladesh, both for the Rohingyas and for the host community. The prolongation of the stalemate in repatriation is leading this vulnerable population towards frustration and making them susceptible to unlawful activities and encouraging them to undertake ventures risking their lives. These can flare up the flames of security, volatile for the region and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, though the Rohingya crisis is a problem between Myanmar and its people, the forcible displacement has created greater economic, environmental, and social security challenges for Bangladesh. And beyond that, it has greater ramifications on regional security, concerns like radicalization and transnational crimes, human and drug trafficking, and arms smuggling. The status of statelessness and an experience of a long history of systemic deprivation in Rakhine, deprivation from basic rights and education, Rohingyas have become more vulnerable to radicalization, and global terrorist outfits may take this chance to recruit and employ them in terrorist acts and transnational crimes. Another security concern is drug trafficking. Drug trade, particularly the Yaba business in this region, has gained continuous fettle. The Rohingyas became prey to transnational drug traffickers. Moreover, a serious concern is that the bordering areas of this region could be turned into a transit route for drugs produced in the Golden Triangle. Human trafficking is also another major security concern. A group of transnational human traffickers are targeting Rohingya youths, women, and children, particularly for forced labor in different countries of Southeast Asia. The sea route through the Bay of Bengal has become a prominent spot for illegal migration and human trafficking. Distinguished presence. Bangladesh government has engaged about 3,000 security personnel, including members of security agencies, to improve the security situation inside the 33 camps in Cox's Bazar. 3 battalions of the Armed Police Battalion are engaged to manage law and order situations inside the camps. In addition, Cox's Bazar District Police and other security agencies run operations as and when required. Community policing involving Rohingya volunteers patrol inside the camps at night side by side with our security agencies. Respected audience, Bangladesh government has built proper infrastructure with better amenities in Bhasanchar, spending more than $350 million from its own budget, covering an area of 13,000 acres, to voluntarily relocate around 100,000 Rohingya people to decrease and to decongest the Rohingya camps. So far, around 32,000 FDMNs have been voluntarily relocated to Bhasanchar. The security situation in Bhasanchar is very stable. There is hardly any criminal activity or armed conflict. Increased number of relocation to Bhasanchar will contribute to improving the security situation in Cox's Bazar camps. Distinguished presence, Bangladesh government is adopting measures to keep the Rohingyas, particularly children and youth, engaged in productive activities. Government, in collaboration with UN agencies, INGOs, and NGOs, are imparting education to Rohingya children following Myanmar curriculum through more than 6,000 learning centers, developing skills of Rohingyas in the trades available in Rakhine, and engaging Rohingyas as volunteers in humanitarian operations in a systematic and effective way. These initiatives are helping them to practice their distinct cultural identities and would help their reintegration when they return to their homes in Rakhine State. Ladies and gentlemen, the question of international justice and accountability will be critical in finding a durable solution to the Rohingya crisis. It would also act as an important confidence-building measure for the sustainable repatriation of the Rohingyas to their homes in Myanmar and their legitimate rights restored. Bangladesh is against any form of impunity from justice and will support any initiative to ensure justice and accountability. The declaration by Germany and UK to support the case at the International Court of Justice, along with Canada and the Netherlands, are definitely steps towards the right direction. US declaration of genocide and recent announcement of the third country resettlement are also encouraging developments. Distinguished presence, raising awareness among the Rohingyas, irrespective of gender and ages, through mass campaigns is one of the ways to reduce violence, crime, trafficking of drugs or persons among them. We hope the UN agencies, INGOs, and NGOs would work vigorously to motivate the Rohingyas to avoid any criminal activities, trafficking. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the sole responsibility of Myanmar to bring a durable solution to the crisis, complying with the broader mandate of the United Nations. The United Nations Security Council should play a constructive role beyond their political agenda for the greater peace and stability of the region. Bangladesh welcomes the resolution adopted in the United Nations Security Council on 21st December 2022 on the situation in Myanmar, expressing solidarity with Bangladesh's effort towards ensuring a sustainable solution to the crisis through arranging voluntary, safe, and dignified repatriation of the Rohingya to their homeland. It also underscores the need to create the necessary conditions in Myanmar. And in this regard, Bangladesh expects an effective initiative from the United Nations Special Envoy on Myanmar. Bangladesh will continue its bilateral and international efforts to resolve this crisis. These efforts will, I expect, will provide the opportunity for finding a peaceful and sustainable solution to the problem, enabling voluntary, sustainable, and dignified repatriation of Rohingyas to their own land. It must be noted that in a period of global uncertainty, we must act we must tread cautiously and carefully. Distinguished presence, creation of a safe, conducive situation in the northern Rakhine, and the smooth conduct of the repatriation and reintegration of Rohingyas by ensuring political will of the Myanmar government are enormous tasks. Support and engagement of the United Nations agencies, regional bodies, and international partners are much needed. The United Nations and the partners must undertake tangible actions and projects to create an environment conducive for sustainable repatriation. ASEAN, its humanitarian arm, the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Management, called AHA Center, and individual member countries, with their deeper historic relationship and leverage vis-a-vis Myanmar, can take meaningful roles in such comprehensive engagement. Apart from ASEAN's 5 points, they should undertake elaborate efforts to fully implement Kofi Annan Advisory Commission on Rakhine States recommendations and create a pathway for citizenship of Rohingyas. AHA centers may be empowered and their volunteers' meaningful presence as civilian observers will boost confidence of the Rohingyas for their voluntary return. With these remarks, I conclude my observation. Let me once again thank BISS for arranging such an important seminar. Thank you very much for your patience. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangla.
Thank you, sir, Honorable Minister, for your very lucid and comprehensive summing up of the issues. I'll just make one little comment before I do my duty of thanking everyone. That is, in spite of the magnitude of the problem, the challenges and threats, the government of Bangladesh has handled the issue relatively well and managed to keep the situation under control. However, we must continue to remain vigilant and progressively strengthen our efforts to resolve the issue. With those words, may I now formally thank our Honorable Chief Guest, the Honorable Minister for Law and Parliamentary Affairs, Government of Bangladesh, for taking time out from his very busy schedule to be here with us and honor this event with his presence and his very enlightening and very comprehensive words. May I also thank all the designated discussants for making very valuable contribution in our search for facts and way forward. I think they have all pointed pointed fingers at the areas where we must act, and also given us very good suggestions. May I also thank the audience, because without your presence and participation, this program wouldn't be as successful as it has been. And so thank you all. And all of us give a big hand to all of you. And finally, may I also thank the BISS, DG, and all the officials and staff for the hard work they have done in preparing for this event and bringing us all together and being a very gracious host today. Thank you. So thank you, everybody. This brings us to the end of the program.